All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Northwest Gas Association's February edition of our monthly webinar series, this month featuring Ty Jennings, a building code specialist with the Cascade Natural Gas Corporation. And we're looking forward to Ty's comments. You've hopefully seen his bio on our website. So before I get to Ty and turn things over to Ty, I just want to point out here that we, as usual in our webinar series, we ask all of our participants to remain muted to minimize background noise and to pose questions in the chat feature. You're all familiar by now with Zoom and how to work that chat feature. So I'll be monitoring the chat during Ty's presentation, and as you ask a question, I've told Ty I'll interrupt him, hopefully politely, to pose your question to him, and he'll take it at that time. The other thing we would like you to consider, Ty has asked me to ask you all to be thinking about scenarios that you want to explore after he's done walking through the, for lack of a better word, what we'll call a flow chart for how to use natural gas given the code, the 2021 code that has been adopted and will go into effect July 1st of this year. So with that, Ty, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and give you the opportunity to share yours. And I've got a couple people I need to continue to admit here while you're getting ready to pull yours up. Okay. All right. And just one last comment. Ty has made, will make his slides available to us, and this is being recorded and will be posted to the Northwest Gas Association's YouTube channel after probably later this afternoon. So you can look forward to the next couple of days. Okay. Ty, thank you again for your time today and for giving us some insight about the Washington State Energy Code going forward and the role of natural gas in it.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan. As Dan introduced, my name is Ty Jennings. I am with Cascade Natural Gas. Cascade was fortunate enough to create a position that I was able to fill where I am providing building and energy code support throughout our service region. So I'm pleased to be partnering with the Northwest Gas Association here today and just kind of talking through some of the concepts coming up with this next energy code with you all today. So what's coming up? Change is coming. The Washington State Energy Code is going to be a different animal this year. So let's talk about it a little bit. First off, let's address where we're at. So the council has completed all final decision making, and the CR 103 filings have been published through WAC, the Washington Registrar's Office. So we have that WAC language. We know what the energy code is going to be. So just again, providing a quick summary here, we have two legislative directives that focus our energy code development in Washington State. Those can be found in RCW 19.27A. And then I've referenced two different sections here. The first is a broad goal of being zero or having achieved zero fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions and buildings through increased energy efficiency. What this does not do is it does not provide a specific directive for a measured quantity of energy reduction or getting to zero fossil fuel other than as a broad goal. However, in comparison, we have section 19.27A 160 that provides a specific directive that we have to achieve a 70% reduction in annual net energy consumption over the 2006 Washington State Energy Code as a baseline. So that is a much more measurable directive. And with that goal, we can actually see what our progress is, and we can see where the energy code is trending. Okay. So I think this for most is kind of a review here, but just wanted to bring that up as kind of an introduction. So a lot of people have heard there's a ban on natural gas. I'm the first to say we've got to stop saying it's a ban, right? It's not a ban. It's a series of restrictions. So with the 2021 Washington State Energy Codes, the State Building Code Council has voted to approve limitations on the use of natural gas in both residential and commercial buildings effective July 1, 2023. While these limitations are intended to reduce greenhouse emissions, they generally prohibit the use of natural gas for space or water heating unless complying with some specific exceptions. So we'll go into what those exceptions are, because that's really the crux of what we're trying to get at here today. So the future of natural gas in Washington, it's going to evolve. There's going to be continued opportunities for natural gas under the 2021 Washington State Energy Code. Those areas will primarily be supplemental heating and system with limited regulation. You know, our classic clothes dryers, pool heaters, fireplaces, and hearths, cooking, and industrial processes. We also have in the residential side where natural gas heat pumps are going to be a available pathway. So wanted to just kind of throw those out there. One of the things that I'll say is, you know, as we develop policy here in Washington State, we really have to be thinking about how we are approaching this for the benefit of Washington. So I think that's a really, you know, this is a great quote here that I really think kind of speaks to our unique situation here in Washington. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for just a moment. And pull up the focus of today's presentation.
While you're doing that, Ty, I'll just remind folks as Ty goes through the presentation, if you do have questions, please enter them in the chat function. And be thinking as Ty goes through this flow chart, be thinking about scenarios that you might want to ask Ty about how a certain scenario would navigate through this flow chart. Thanks, Ty.
Thanks, Dan. So what we have here is we have the flow charts. This is what we're here to discuss today. So natural gas in the 2021 Washington State Energy Code, right now we're going to focus on the commercial aspect. This is the flow chart that we have prepared here at Cascade. Northwest Gas Association is partnering with us in this. They will actually have a Northwest Gas Association branded version coming out and will be delivered and shared with you soon. We're hoping to have that out this week. So keep an eye out for that. That will be sent out to all the participants, is my understanding of today's webinar. But let's get into it. So what this is this is basic flow chart providing a sequence of options that you can follow through to determine whether gas can be used and what the code and requirements are. This is intended to be used in conjunction with a printed copy of the code or an online version, however you access your codes. But what this does is it really helps you identify very quickly what the code sections that are applicable to your project are. So, for example, we're looking at the top half of the poster right now. Again, this is for commercial construction, and it's focused on new construction options. So as we start on the left side, we can see we're in new construction, and we can move to the right, and we get more and more refined as we progress to the right. So let me see if I can annotate here. Apologize here. It doesn't look like there's an annotation function. So as we look at the left side, we'll take the step up first. So we start with new construction, which is going to be found in Chapter 4 of the Washington State Energy Code. As we move up from that first block, we can get into HVAC systems, which then provides, again, a code reference to Section C403. And then as we progress further right, it'll tell us what the requirements are. So the basic requirement under Section C403 is that HVAC heating shall not be provided by natural gas combustion appliances unless meeting one of the following exceptions. Provides a direct code reference to that section, and then we list out the individual exceptions here. So for example, if we were to come right off that, and again, sticking to the very top, we see that air to water heat pumps in climate zone 5 are permitted to use supplemental natural gas heat for hydronic systems. And then it must comply with conditions 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 of section C403.1.4. Again, we can look at the various exceptions that are below that, and we can really start to get a picture of, okay, if I'm able to use natural gas, what is the code section that I must rely on? Now, this isn't intended to be an all-encompassing presentation of the code. It is absolutely not that. But what it does is it allows you to very quickly identify the code section or the possibility of applying for an exception. As we progress down from new construction downwards, we can get into service water heating. And then we can see that service water heating shall not be provided by natural gas combustion appliances unless meeting one of the following exceptions. And then it again breaks out and progresses towards identifying what those exceptions are and where they exist within the code. As we move onward, we can get to the bottom half of the chart and we can see that that presents existing construction. Again, we break it out by the various types of permitted work under existing construction, that being additions, alterations, and change of occupancy. And then we again break it out towards space conditioning as well as water heating. And again, it identifies the exceptions that exist and provides you a sequence of events that you can follow through in determining whether your project would be able to use natural gas in meeting one of the exceptions identified. So again, very simple in concept. We're going to start at the left. We're going to work towards the right. And again, this is not an all-encompassing rendition of the code, but it's going to direct you to the most applicable code section and really provide access and understanding that I think really expedites the process, if you will. Beyond the commercial version, we also have a residential version. The residential version is a little bit different in the formatting, is that it is not so focused on purely being for space and water heating, but actually encompasses some other elements as well. So again, we start with our new construction element on the very left-hand side, but with the residential energy code, you have 3 different routes that you can go. That is the prescriptive compliance method, which is found in the Washington State Energy Code sections R401 through R404, and then in section R406. You have the total building performance method, which is section R405. And then you can also always go with a certified passive house method, section R407. We provide basic descriptions for the latter 2, the total building performance method and the certified passive house method. Those are less common in Washington State for the most part. Most people are going to go with the prescriptive, kind of the cookie cutter method, if you will, that's found in sections R401 through R404 and R406. So from here, we can go up to the very top and we identify what the general requirements are. We have a note here saying that clothes dryers, emergency generators, and fire pits are not regulated by the Washington State Energy Code residential provisions. Again, we want to identify that there is a path for other appliances besides, the space heating and water heating that are undercoming the most regulation at this time. Also, under that general requirements, we note that cooking appliances in pools or spas are permitted to use natural gas for heating where not equipped with a continuously burning pilot light. Those 2 systems have some minor regulations there that we just wanted to address and have noted out. From there, we can step down to service water heating. Again, we have our code section that provides us a direct reference to where we need to be conducting our research under the code. And then it identifies and summarizes the code requirement therein. From there, we can continue to progress and we actually see what the exceptions are allowing for natural gas. And I'm going to focus here on the service hot water system. So that's the second path down from the prescriptive compliance method. We identified that service water heating in 1- and 2-family dwellings and multiple single-family dwellings, townhouses, shall be provided by a heat pump system. The heat pump water heating system shall be sized to provide 100% of peak hot water demand. From there, we step over and we see the final conditions. The first condition, gas heat pump. If we install a gas heat pump, that complies. The residential code was structured a little bit differently, as I believe most in this group are aware. And it really is intended to allow for that future generation of equipment that's coming out that is gas heat pumps. We're hopeful that there may be some consideration by the State Building Code Council to allow that for commercial and kind of create a crosswalk or a little bit of more common language between the commercial and the residential. We'll see where that comes out though. But for now, gas heat pumps are allowed in residential construction, residential being single family, 2-family, and multifamily that is 3 stories or less, accessed from the exterior. We can also identify that under exception number 3, dwelling units with no more than 1,000 square feet of conditioned floor area can qualify for an exemption. We also understand that per exception number 4, supplementary water heating systems in accordance with a specific code section referenced, provided that the system capacity does not exceed the capacity of the heat pump water heating system, meaning that you can't install a gas backup that is going to be larger than the primary appliance. However, you can use gas as a supplementary backup system. Gas can also be used for snow and ice melt systems. And then the last note there is that the service hot water system shall be installed within the building thermal envelope unless the system efficiency is greater than or equal to 2.0 UEF, and it provides the code reference therein. So really, that's the path. That is an example of how we can walk through this and identify what the conditions are. Similarly, we've identified that for heating systems, electrical power and lighting. That's fairly simple. You just can't, again, have a continuously burning pilot light. And then we get down to the section here in green. That is our additional energy efficiency credits. So each dwelling within a residential building must obtain credits from tables R406.2 and R406.3 to achieve a sufficient number of credits. Under the previous energy code that we had through the 2018 cycle, that was going to be about 6 credits for a medium family dwelling. That has dropped slightly to 5 credits under this coming energy code that's going to roll out in July. But there are some new options. The table's really been quite substantially modified. But what we wanted to identify here is there are credits available for gas if you select certain equipment. So for combustion heating systems, system type 1, those are going to be systems where you can only really obtain that credit if there's no electrical utility service. So if you're in a cabin or somewhere remote where you can't get electrical service, you're off the grid, you can obtain that credit therein. For an heating system type that's going to be a hybrid or a combination system where you have a heat pump with a supplemental gas heating system, whether that be a gas combustion furnace or some other form, you can obtain up to a half credit therein for going with that system type. So we wanted to make sure and identify that there are additional efficiency credits that can be had by going through a system design that uses natural gas. Again, then we also have our existing residential construction flowchart here. This is much simpler, if you will. Existing construction in residential world is quite a bit simpler, if you will. So again, we identified the various types of modifications to existing construction, that being additions, alterations, repairs, or change of occupancy. And with those, again, we flow to the right, identifying code sections and pathways available for the use of natural gas. One of the aspects that I would really comment on for both commercial and residential is to look at alterations. Alterations are the definition of actually going in and replacing a component of a system. So if you have a gas piece of equipment that's providing either space or water heating, and that appliance is reaching the end of its service life, and you want to replace that, that is going to be an alteration of the system. So that's how the state energy code classifies that scope of work.
I have a question.
Yes, sir, Dan.
Since R403.5.7 refers to everything but 3-story multifamily external stairs, are there any restrictions to gas to that occupancy?
So you're asking if it is outside of the scope of the residential energy code and is under the commercial. So it's a 4 stories or more, or it is a internal access. Is that what you're asking?
Kevin, you want to pop off mute and clarify, please? Kevin?
That's a little bit of a process. Just a sec here. Okay. You can hear me now though, right?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you, Kevin. How are we doing?
I'm referring to the occupancy that's in between. So it's in the residential code, but it's that when you look at the language, it's single family, duplex, and townhomes only in this particular section about space heating and water heating. But the definition of a residential building includes that 3-story construction with external stairs, which is not commercial, it's still residential. So it appears to me there's a opening there for gas equipment in that occupancy, if that makes sense.
Correct. So if it is a 3-story, like woody walk-up type apartment building, you're going to be under the residential energy code provisions. So in those cases, there is a specific section that I believe you're referring to here. And we're looking at service hot water systems. So I apologize for not being able to annotate on my screen, but if we start at new construction to the left, we take that first step up to prescriptive compliance. And then we take the second path that says service hot water systems. We would see here in the definition, or in that kind of central middle section, that service hot water in 1 and 2 family dwellings and multiple single family dwellings, which are townhomes, shall be provided by a heat pump system. Now, due to the specificity of that section, the question that you're asking is a 3-story apartment building going to be required to have a heat pump type water heating device? And the answer is no. In that specific condition, the energy code would allow for the use and installation of a gas water heater, whether that be tankless or a tanked water heater system. You do have to meet the minimum efficiency requirements, but you would be able to use a gas system in that case. Does that answer the question, Kevin?
I muted him again. I think it did. He'll pose one in the, yes, he says in the chat, it does answer the question. Thanks.
Excellent. So just going back to the existing construction, just to provide a closing for that. But one of the biggest things that we're going to have to be discussing with people is what are the provisions going to look like in the future? Are they going to allow for the continued replacement of existing appliances with like-for-like type equipment? Under this energy code, that will remain as long as it is not being increased in capacity or size and meeting, current efficiency levels. So that is one of the positive elements, is that we can communicate to the public that if you have gas in, that you're going to be able to continue to use that gas system. So in a nutshell, flowcharts working process. As Dan mentioned at the onset of this, I would welcome anybody to come back and pose any scenarios that they have to see how the flowchart works. And I can definitely walk through any specific conditions where you want to know if gas is going to be allowed, and kind of show you and demonstrate the functionality of the flowcharts here.
So while you all are cogitating and preparing your questions for the chat or scenarios that you'd like to submit, I have a couple here, Ty. So one question, can you summarize, you've gone through this very quickly, but can you summarize in a couple of sentences the pathways that are available for compliance in the residential energy code?
So again, those pathways really are the prescriptive compliance method, which I often compare to Legos, right? It gives you a series of blocks and you have to put them together, right? It is a very much an instructive set of pathways that you have to follow. So the prescriptive compliance is the most common path here in Washington State for residential construction. And it really identifies and says, this is how you build, or this is how you comply with the energy code. Very instructive. We also have the total building performance method. That method is based upon extensive modeling, and it looks at the carbon emissions for both a standard reference design as well as the proposed design. Once you go through the energy modeling and simulation, you have to express your results in pounds of carbon per square foot of conditioned floor area. If you are meeting or exceeding that of the standard model home, you can proceed in your own direction. So again, this path would allow for the use of natural gas. You would have to couple that with something that is going to offset those carbon emissions, because this is a carbon emission based measurement, but that is a pathway that is available for the continued use of natural gas. Again, that is the total building performance method. So modeling based on carbon emission. That's what you need to know there. There's also the certified passive house method. This is complying with the PHI-US Plus 2018 passive building standard. This is going to include US DOE Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready Home co-requisites. Again, you're going through extensive calculations by approved software, and you have to comply with a series of modeling conditions to demonstrate that it is a passive house. So those are the three pathways that are available for residential construction.
So so explain to me, if you're a builder or a homeowner that wants to build a home, what's that mean? I mean, so what's the passive mean? What's all this mean? I want gas in my home. What am I going to have to do?
Yeah, so again, for most people, prescriptive compliance is going to be the path that they go through. The total building performance method and the certified passive house method are going to be much more extensive pathways to go through. They're going to be more expensive, right? We get more extensive requirements. We also have expenses associated with that. These are going to be homes that are typically constructed well above the minimum code standards found within both the residential codes as well as within the energy codes requirements. Certified passive houses are going to be basically net zero homes, whereas the total building performance method, you're really not looking necessarily at net zero, but you're looking at a standard reference design that is typical of where this energy code through the prescriptive method is going to get you. And you're saying, I can either meet or beat that through a combination of systems that I'm installing in the home. It's a much more extensive process in that you actually are modeling it, but it allows you to take credit for, say, additional efficiencies that you're achieving through some other method.
Okay. I don't see anything in the chat yet. So here's another one. Can natural gas in commercial properties, so say you have boilers for space and water heat, can you replace like for like in a commercial existing building?
Yeah, so let's go back over to the commercial poster design that we have here. Again, we're going to start at the very left-hand side. We're talking existing construction, and we're talking an alteration. So in this case, I believe you mentioned boilers, correct?
I'm just, like for like is really what we're getting at here.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, we'll go through both routes. So let's start at the left-hand side. We're going to go existing construction. We're going to come right across the middle pathway that's an alteration. And let's go up to HVAC systems. So with an HVAC system, we have 4 different options that present. Are we replacing components of an existing mechanical system? Are we putting in a new system? Are we relocating equipment? Or are we doing an addition or replacement of a heating appliance? Now, in the case proposed here, I believe that would be an addition or a replacement of a heating appliance. So we're going to drop down from HVAC systems to the very bottom tier here, which says addition or replacement of heating appliance. Now we have 2 paths as we come out of that. We can either comply as if new construction, and again, we reference back to section C403.1.4, which is going to be the basic requirements that we identify at the top of the poster, or we can look at table C503.4.6. In looking at that table, we can see that furnaces, duct furnaces, and unit heaters must have an efficiency 10% greater than the base value from table C403.3.2 number 5. So right there, we can look at saying we're replacing an existing forced air furnace in a commercial project. It has reached the end of its service life, time to replace it. We can go back in with a like for like substitution. all that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to exceed the base efficiency level by 10%. So the base efficiency for a forced air furnace is going to be 80%. So if we wanted to, we could go back in with a 90% forced air furnace and comply with this option right here. We also can look at gas fired hot water boilers. If we're replacing less than 80% of the served coils, again, we can hit that 10% greater efficiency and comply. Now, I will mention, if we take a look at section C503.4.6, there are a number of exceptions there. Again, we're not trying to be an exhaustive, but we do want to identify the most applicable pathways towards identifying when natural gas can be used.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the residential side. Oh, we got a chat here. So one comment is from Kevin Duell. I believe steam boilers are exempt. Can you comment on that?
Yes, so there is an exception that is allowed for steam boilers. Let me see. I believe that is under the service water heating. Let me take a look here. Or is that? I gotta think here. You know, Kevin, I'm familiar with the exception that you're speaking of. I'm not seeing it identified immediately on here. But I would have to research that further and get back to you on that one to see why that one was, what the pathway towards that is. But I do believe there was something related to existing steam boilers.
Maybe while we're thinking through that, here Kevin's got a comment in here for replacement, he says. So existing construction replacement.
Okay.
Maybe let me move on. Maybe we can come back to that. So back on the residential side, I'm a homeowner. When am I going to have to convert my furnace to electricity, to electric or water heater? When am I going to have to go all over?
So one of the things that's really great about our code development here in Washington State is that the building and energy codes really respect existing structures. So under Washington State, unless you are replacing or modifying something, it is allowed to remain as is under the code under which it was permitted. Now, there are several policies being implemented across Washington State, mostly directed at commercial, that would require certain retrofits to be made in the progress towards getting towards a greenhouse reduction across Washington State. But for residential construction, there has not been any mandate as of yet to require you to update your systems unless it is voluntary, equipment is reaching the end of its service life, et cetera.
Well, let me expound on that then. So 5 years ago, I replaced my furnace. 7 years ago, I replaced my water heater. Let's say these codes were in place then. When I had to replace my water heater, would I have had to go to a heat pump water heater?
No.
I replaced my furnace 5 years ago, my 80% efficient gas furnace. Would I have had to go to a heat pump?
No, in this case, we would again look at the residential side. We would look at existing construction. We would look at alterations. And then we could look here at the exception. So for heating, we would look at that and say new heating, cooling, and duct systems that are part of an alteration shall comply with section C403 as required for new construction. That makes it sound like, yes, you're going to. However, when we get to the far right side, we see exception number 3, and it says replacements of space heating equipment shall not be required to comply with section R403.13, where the rated capacity of the new equipment does not exceed the rated capacity of the existing equipment. Meaning, as long as it's like for like and it's not getting any larger in capacity, you would be able to replace that like for like. You could take an existing gas appliance out and put a new gas appliance in. If we look at that from a service water heating, a domestic water heating system, We would drop down from alterations. We would look at new service hot water systems that are part of an alteration shall comply with section C 403.5 as required for new construction. And then we're provided 2 exceptions here. Replacement of water heating equipment shall not be required to comply with section R 403.5.5 and be installed within the building thermal envelope, meaning that if your water heater's in the garage, it would be allowed to remain in the garage. And then we have exception number 2 that states replacement of water heating equipment shall not be required to comply with section R 403.5.7 and be a heat pump where the rated capacity of the new equipment does not exceed the rated capacity of the existing equipment. Again, stating basically, as long as your equipment is the same size or smaller, you can replace like for like with gas appliance.
What if I want to put in a instant Rheem hot water heater?
The question there gets a little bit different because when you're looking at those, you're going to typically have a higher BTU rating on a instant water heater than you would on a tanked water heater. So again, you would have to probably propose to your local code official that it is equivalent in some way. You would not be able to directly rely on the BTU rating because the measurement is considerably different. However, you would have to, demonstrate some type of equivalency to be approved by your local code official.
So even though it might be dramatically more efficient than my tank water heater, it's not like for like. That's what I'm hearing you say.
It is not a like for like in that case. However, if I were the code official reviewing that, I would be looking at, the varying efficiency levels and considering what you have, because it is well understood that there is substantial energy savings with a tankless system. But again, if you have a jurisdiction that is going to go explicitly by the code, it's going to have to be a like for like system with a equal or lesser capacity.
Okay, I have a comment or question from Srikant Banerjee. I hope I've got that about right. Is normal maintenance allowed? I think, and then they go on to say, if I replace part of the system as maintenance, does that get you into the kind of, outside the bounds of this? And I guess I'd invite Srikant, if I'm getting that wrong, to go ahead and come off mute and clarify.
Yeah, so the main thing there is that is going to be classified as a repair. So again, we can look at the residential side here, and from existing construction, we're going to drop down to repairs, which is found in section R504. And it says the reconstruction or renewal of any part of an existing building for the purpose of its maintenance or to correct damage. That is the definition of a repair. Buildings and structures and parts thereof shall be repaired in compliance with section R501.3 and section R504. Generally, what those sections say is that you have to use current available materials. You can't use or reconfigure the system in a substantially different way. But yes, a repair, let's say you have an air conditioner outside and that AC compressor goes out, you're going to be able to just replace that AC compressor and allow your system to continue operating in the function that it is. If you have a forced air furnace and the blower fan burns up, you're going to be able to complete that repair with no requirement for substantially altering or replacing your system.
Okay, so Srikant, give me a thumbs up if we got that about right. He said thank you, so appreciate it. One last one for me, Ty. Talk to me about critical facilities. Can critical facilities use natural gas for space or water heating? And maybe while you go into that question, you might describe critical facilities. So when I ask the question, I'm thinking at least hospitals, maybe schools, public safety kinds of spaces, but maybe you can go a little more into detail of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So defining critical spaces is a very interesting aspect under the code. So to really get an idea of what those are, we have to consider what's in the Washington State Building Code, the International Building Code, if you will. So with that, what I'll identify is we'll go to the new construction side of commercial for the flow chart here. And we're going to look at new construction, and let's just talk about HVAC systems. So we're going to get over to our different exceptions here, and we're going to see two different exceptions that may apply. So the first one I want to talk about is the third one down, and those are going to be the specific conditions found in C403.1.4 exception number 9. So portions of a building that requires natural gas space heating for specific conditions approved by the code official for research, healthcare, process, or other specific needs that cannot practically be served by heat pump or other space heating systems. Note that this is not a blanket exception for any occupancy type. However, if you have a facility that is absolutely critical that you have gas infrastructure providing your space heating, you can make a petition to your local code official and say, hey, we need to use gas for this reason. Our building is unique for this reason as well. And then you can make that petition. Also, we're going to go right back to that kind of the fourth column there where it lists the exceptions. And we're going to drop to the very bottom one, and that's essential facilities. That's exception number 18. And that says group I2 and I3 occupancies that by regulation, meaning typically Department of Health, are required to have in place redundant emergency backup systems. Now, for those unfamiliar with the IBC and the occupancy classifications, I2 and I3 are predominantly going to be your hospitals and your jails. So those types of facilities would also be allowed to continue to use natural gas, meeting the minimum efficiency requirements.
Okay. Well, that's all I have. Ty, I'll give everybody last call to use the chat there to pose a final question or a scenario you might want Ty to walk through. In the meantime, Ty, I'm gonna go ahead and ask you to stop. I'm gonna stop sharing your screen and share mine again while we're waiting for people to ask questions, and we can come back to yours if we need to. But I just wanted to put up our screen again. And just note, any questions in the chat? I'll just be quiet here for about 15 seconds or so and give people a chance to type. All right, well, seeing no questions, or maybe folks are still chatting, I'll do a word dance here a little bit and point out to folks, oh, here we do have one more question. From Larry Andrews, how can you use natural gas for domestic water for home use again? Can you use natural gas for domestic water for home use? And how? You want to pull your flow chart back up?
Yeah, if I may, that'd be great.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so we're going to look at new construction residential again. From there, we're going to look at the prescriptive compliance path. Again, I want to identify that you can still go the total building performance method or the certified passive house method. However, we're going to come from new construction, moving upwards to the prescriptive compliance method. From there, we're going to step rightward to service hot water systems, and we're going to identify what the basic code requirement is. And that is that service hot water in 1 and 2 family dwellings and multiple single family dwellings shall be provided by a heat pump system. Moving to the right, we're going to identify the exceptions that would allow for that system to use natural gas. The first system type being a gas heat pump. The second exception, being exception number 3 from the code, is a dwelling units with no more than 1,000 square feet of conditioned floor area. We also have exception number 4 that allows for supplementary water heating systems in accordance with the reference code section, provided that the system capacity does not exceed the capacity of the heat pump water heating system, meaning it has to be, the backup system can be no larger than the primary system. We can also use service hot water for snow and ice melt systems if you want to have a gas boiler for those snow and ice melt systems. And then we just have an informal note that the service hot water system shall be installed within the building thermal envelope unless the system efficiency is greater than that of a UEF of 2.0. So predominantly, you're only going to be able to use gas for either a gas heat pump if the home is less than 1,000 square feet, or as a backup supplementary system to, say, a traditional electric heat pump.
Can you go through that really quickly on the commercial side, Ty, because that's where, you know, there could be very large and intense hot water loads on the commercial side for short periods of time, right? I'm thinking like a hotel from 7 to 8 in the morning has a huge demand for hot water. Can you tell me how that works?
Absolutely.
Hotels or even restaurants during peak periods and the like.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to step back over to the commercial poster. We're going to start at the left-hand side for new construction. We're going to step down to service hot water heating, and we're going to identify that service hot water heating shall not be provided by natural gas combustion appliances unless meeting one of the following exceptions. From there, we have 2 exceptions. 1, supplemental service water heating equipment per section C404.2.1.4. And what that identifies is it identifies a series of conditions with which the equipment must comply.
Basically, it has to meet 50% of the load. Is that right?
Correct.
Is that 50% of a 24-hour load or 50% of a 1-hour load?
You know, I'd have to pull up the code to give you an exact answer on that. But what I would like to identify, though, Dan, is there are some exceptions to the mandatory heat pump water heating. Those are listed kind of as we come down off of that. There's 3 exceptions identified. So we can have service hot water systems served by a district energy system that serves multiple buildings and that was in service before the effective date of this code. Systems connected to a low carbon district energy exchange system or a low carbon district heating and cooling or heating only system. Or again, essential facilities in groups I2 and I3 occupancies that by regulation are required to have in place redundant emergency backup systems.
Okay. All right. I think people have had plenty of time here, Ty, so terrific presentation. We thank you very much for your time. And I'm going to try sharing my screen one last time so I can just tell folks what's coming up. So Ty, thank you very much again. Obviously, folks, Ty is an expert coming out of the code enforcement side of things to work with Cascade Natural Gas on codes, and a really wonderful resource for the industry here. So we do just want to reiterate that we'll be making the slides available by request, but we have a recording of this webinar that will be posted to the Northwest Gas Association's YouTube channel, probably in a couple of hours. Takes a little time to render the recording. And then we invite you to join us in March, on March 16th from noon to 1 p.m. For our monthly webinar series, which in March will be from the Pacific Northwest National Lab, deploying carbon technology for net zero targets in the Pacific Northwest. So this should be a terrific presentation by Cassie Davidson. And we're really looking forward to that. So please go to our website, find the link, register. The last thing I'll note for you is, hey, take a look. We've unveiled a new look. We have a new logo for the Northwest Gas Association. We've modernized our logo to reflect the evolution that our member companies are making as they continue to try and work to serve a cleaner energy future. So with that, we'll thank you for your time today. Hopefully you found this a useful and informative webinar, and we look forward to seeing you next month for deploying carbon technology for net zero targets, March 16th. Thank you, everybody.